If you've been paying attention for a while to what the Ottawa real estate market in general is doing, you've probably realized that the headline numbers for the city don't really reflect what's going on in the individual markets. That's definitely the case for Barrhaven. So if you're interested in what's going on in Barrhaven, how prices are doing, if sales volume keeps up to the rest of the city, and what that could mean for you if you're looking to buy or sell in this part of town in 2026, you are in the right place. And the advice really depends on the sort of property that you're looking at. As we'll see in the coming slides, there's a big divide between what's happening in the freehold market and what's happening in the relatively small condo market in Barrhaven. Now today we're only really going to focus on Barrhaven as a whole, but if you're curious as to what's going on in your specific neighborhood or even on a specific street, don't hesitate to reach out and I can send you that information. Whether you're looking to buy or sell or just looking to educate yourself, I'd be happy to help however I can. With that out of the way, let's get into the information itself. So the first number I like to look at is the total number of new listings. Now, the total number of new listings is all of the listings that hit the MLS in 2025 in Barrhaven. Now, there is a bit of double counting that's happening here, and the reason for that is a common strategy when people are reducing their price on an existing listing is to cancel the listing and then post a new listing at a lower price. So those listings are going to be double counted. So this number, 3,434, is probably more like something like call it 2,700 if I had to guess. There's no way to know for sure. So that's the number you're going to want to keep in mind when we look at the next one, which is the total number of sales that we're comparing it to. So of the, call it 2,700 listings that came up, only 1,256 of those properties actually sold. And what that means is less than half of the properties that were listed in Barrhaven actually sold in 2025. And I was surprised to find this because this is actually lower than the city average. In the city in general, about half of the properties, just over half of the properties that were listed sold, again, based on the estimates because of the new listing double counting that I was just talking about. But in Barrhaven, it's actually lower. Now, getting into the sales volume by property segment, we're going to start by looking at the freehold properties, which is anything that doesn't have a condo fee. And we can see we followed a pretty normal seasonal pattern here. The dashed orange line is what happened in the 2024 freehold market, and the bar graph is what happened in 2025. We had pretty low sales volume up to March. April, May, June are typically peak months. We can see it was a little bit late actually this year. Normally, I would say the highest month is April or May, but the highest month this year was in June. Quieted down a little bit in July. Quite a busy August, and we really beat the snot out of the 2024 numbers in Barrhaven over the summer. And then they kind of quieted down again as we hit the fall. So this is a little bit unusual. Normally, we would see kind of more what we saw in 2024, this depression heading into the summer market, and then a bit of a pop in the fall before it quieted down for the winter. It was a little bit different in 2025, where that slowdown just kind of started in the fall and then carried through for the rest of the year. Now, if we're looking at the Barrhaven condo market, which I should say off the bat, there's a relatively small sample size here, which can lead to some real volatility in the data, but I thought it was worth looking at either way. We can see we did pretty well in January compared to 2024. February was not a good month. The spring, again, pretty seasonal. We saw most of the sales happen, or a higher number of sales happen kind of between March and June. Quieted down into July, below kind of from June onward the 2024 numbers. Popped again in the fall and then got quiet over the winter. Now this is the same sales number, but we're looking at it by property type breakdown, and this gives us a really good idea of what the profile of the Barrhaven market is like. We can see most of the properties that sold are detached or attached townhouses, and this is the same as like Kanata and Orleans. Most suburbs are going to have this sort of profile. We've got a few semi-detached in there as well. And the other thing that characterizes it is most of the condo properties that are there are condo townhouses rather than apartment style condos. So the average property, quote unquote, in Barrhaven is going to be a detached condo, an attached townhouse, or maybe a townhouse condo. And I find it's useful to keep that in mind when we're looking at this breakdown, which is the same number. I messed up the title here. This should say by price. This is by price point here. So we can see most of the properties in Barrhaven sold between $500,000 and $700,000. We saw quite a few in the 8 to 900 range as well, but most of them, the average quote unquote property in Barrhaven, is probably a detached or a townhouse between $500,000 and $700,000. And again, we have a fair few in that higher price point, and anything below $500,000, you can pretty much rest assured is a condo townhouse or an apartment condo or a very, very old townhouse or something. Now, one of my favorite stats to look at when I'm looking at any real estate data is the months of inventory. And we can see here that the condos and freeholds are actually super different for months of inventory. So months of inventory is basically we take the number of listings that's on the market at the end of a given period and divide it by the number of listings that sold in that same period. And what that gives us is a measure of absorption. So the higher this number is, the slower that section of the real estate market is. It usually means because there's a high supply or there's a slow demand that's causing that number to rise. Anything that's over 6 months of inventory is considered a buyer's market. Anything that's between 4 and 6 months of inventory is considered a balanced market, and anything below that 4-month range is considered a seller's market. And what's interesting about the Barrhaven market is we can see that both the condo and the freehold properties started the year at about the same place, around 1.87 months of inventory, firmly in seller's market territory. And they stayed pretty tight together up until the spring. They started to diverge a little bit in the early summer. But by the end of the year, the freeholds were at 2.62 months of inventory, which is higher than where they started, but still definitely in seller's market. And the condos are all the way up to 5.3, which is in the higher end of balanced market territory. So what that tells us is if you're looking to sell a condo in Barrhaven, it's going to be a little bit tougher. You're going to have more supply that you're competing against, relatively speaking, to how much demand there is there. And if you're looking in the freehold market, it'll be a bit tougher to buy, but it'll be easier to sell a property like that. And this is reflective of what we saw in the city in general, so it's not super surprising to see this. Now, if we move on to the average prices, we're going to start by looking at freeholds. And throughout the year, we can see that end to end, we had a 3.7% decrease in property values on average. We started at 719 in January, which is pretty high, finished at 693 in December. And again, the orange line is the 2024 average sales price. You can see in 2025, we had a pretty seasonably normal market. We started in January a little bit high. They came down in February, got a little bit higher throughout the spring, dropped off in the summer. August was an outlier. That's a weirdly high average price for August. August is one of the quieter months usually, so there might have been a couple of really high-end properties that sold and dragged that average up. September and October were kind of standard, and then it got quieter throughout the year. And then December 2025, it went up again, but I would chalk that up probably to the low sample size. We don't normally see that many sales in the latter part of the year. Taking a look at condo average price, we saw an 8% decrease throughout the year. We started at $394,000, finished around $362,000. Saw kind of a normal seasonality for the first part of the spring. May is usually a busier month, so I was surprised to see it drop there. And then it stayed pretty flat for the rest of the year. We saw a sharp decrease in December, which again could be part of just the smaller sample size, but we did see condo prices drop off, condo demand drop off throughout the year, so not overall too surprised to see that in December. Now, I hope you found this helpful. This is something I'm going to start doing on a monthly basis. So if you want to track what's going on in the Barrhaven market month over month, feel free to get subscribed if you want to get these updates sent to you every single month. And again, if you have any questions about specific neighborhoods or specific streets, don't ever hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to help in any way that I can. Have a wonderful start to your 2026, and I'll see you next month. Cheers.